I found my sister's secret voicemail on a burner phone she hid in a canister of flour the day after her funeral. My nephew and his designer-obsessed wife had already tossed the phone in a trash bag, calling it ancient clutter, like a piece of expired pantry goods from a life that no longer mattered. Now I am the one collecting rent from traveling nurses in that same waterfront condo he tried to steal, and every month the government deducts a portion of his wages from a hospital orderly job under a legal line item labeled compensatory damages. I promised myself I would never let a grieving widow be turned into a footnote in someone else's financial scheme, and I have kept that promise with the same meticulous patience I once used to catch fraudulent billing codes on medical claims. This is exactly how I dismantled their trap board by board, using nothing but a deceased woman's foresight and 3 decades of experience staring at paperwork until it confessed its sins. My name is Elaine. I am 58 years old, and for 22 of those years I worked as a senior medical billing and coding specialist at a regional oncology practice in Tampa before I retired early to care for my husband when he was diagnosed with glioblastoma. His name was Henry, and his last words to me, whispered against the pillow in a hospice room that smelled of antiseptic and wilting carnations, were that I should not forget how to find the one wrong number in a sea of correct ones. I lost him in 18 months, drained and hollowed out and strangely grateful that he was no longer suffering. Afterward I kept myself upright by diving into what I knew best, which was untangling paper trails and cross-referencing procedure codes against insurance denial letters, until I could recite CPT modifiers in my sleep. That skill set felt useless in a world of grief, until a Tuesday morning in March when my younger sister Patricia called me with a voice that sounded sanded down, and she said the word metastases like it was a stranger's name. I moved into her 2-bedroom condo on the marina in St. Petersburg the following Saturday, carrying a single suitcase and the full weight of my widow's savings account. I liquidated $88,000, money that had been earmarked for a small cabin in the Smokies where Henry and I had planned to watch the fireflies, and I redirected every cent into an experimental immunotherapy protocol called tumor-infiltrating lymphocyte therapy that her insurance carrier had classified as investigational and refused to cover. We sat together during the 6-hour infusions in a cold room with vinyl recliners, her hand fragile as a dried leaf in my calloused palm, and she kept repeating, "You will never lose your home again, Elaine. I made sure of it." She had worked as a real estate appraiser for 25 years, the kind who could walk into a house, notice a hairline crack in the foundation, and instantly calculate how much it would cost to fix and how badly it would spook a lender. She was methodical, a little cryptic, and carried a deep distrust of her only child, my nephew Tyler, that she rarely voiced in full sentences. But that day, with the immunotherapy bag dripping clear liquid into her port, she dictated a notarized letter witnessed by a mobile notary and her hospice nurse, stating unequivocally that the condo was mine, that my $88,000 was full consideration for the property and not any form of rent, and that her son should not contest it. She pressed the envelope into my hands with fingers that felt like paper and whispered, "The notary stamp matters more than blood, Elaine. Remember that." I tucked the letter into my purse next to a receipt for a parking garage, and I did not think about it again until the Thursday in early September when the Florida sun pierced the blinds like needles of hot brass and her breathing slowed to a permanent stop. The funeral was modest, arranged by a neighbor named Mrs. Delgado who brought casseroles and a quiet knowledge of Patricia's final wishes. Tyler and Vanessa flew in from Atlanta the night before the service, not to help with the program or the guest list, but to scope the condo's square footage with the efficiency of real estate wholesalers. I watched Vanessa's eyes slide across the quartz countertops, the marina view, the updated bathroom fixtures, and I could practically see the Zillow estimate refreshing behind her pupils like a scrolling stock ticker. They wore black but treated the reception as a networking event, exchanging business cards with distant cousins and asking a second cousin where he had purchased his new Lexus. The day after the funeral, with the air still thick with the scent of lilies and borrowed sympathy, the vultures began to circle in earnest. Tyler arrived at the condo at 8 o'clock on a Saturday morning with a manila folder and a smile that had been practiced in front of a mirror until it looked almost sincere. Vanessa stood behind him, her phone already recording a slow walkthrough of the living room for what she called inventory purposes, though I later learned she was live streaming to a private Instagram group titled Estate Sale Treasures. Tyler sat me down at the kitchen island, poured me a glass of water I did not ask for, and slid a document across the cool granite with the rehearsed authority of a paralegal. It was a revocable living trust, dated 11 months prior, naming Tyler as the sole beneficiary of all of Patricia's real and personal property, with a specific provision transferring the condo to him outright upon her death. The signature page bore Patricia's looping cursive, the same loop I had seen on birthday cards for 40 years, but something in the notary block looked slightly off. The ink of the notary seal seemed too dark, too fresh, and the commission expiration date had a smudge where the numbers should have been crisp. My stomach dropped, but my oncology billing training kicked in like a defibrillator. I said nothing, merely nodded and asked for a day to process my grief. Tyler's jaw tightened, but Vanessa placed a manicured hand on his arm and said, "Of course, Aunt Elaine, we're family. We take care of each other." They left the folder on the counter and retreated to the guest room they had commandeered, and I heard the low hum of their voices planning a timeline. I sat in the silence, staring at the trust document, my mind already dissecting its texture the way I once spotted altered dates on medical records, a single digit changed on a superbill to trigger a higher reimbursement. The paper smelled faintly of fresh toner, a scent I knew from decades of office printers, and it was brighter than the other documents in Patricia's file cabinet. I set it aside and began methodically going through my sister's belongings, an inch at a time, the way I had once audited thousands of explanation of benefit statements while Henry slept in a recliner. In the bedroom closet, behind a stack of old appraisal textbooks with titles like Valuing Waterfront Property in a Changing Market, I found a small lockbox the size of a shoebox, painted teal and sealed with a basic 3-digit combination lock. Tyler had apparently tried to pry it open earlier and declared it empty junk after a few shakes, abandoning it on the carpet. Vanessa had kicked it aside with her stiletto, leaving a scuff mark on the lid like a signature of contempt. I picked it up, felt the weight shift, and sat cross-legged on the floor as the morning light filtered through the blinds. Patricia had taught me a trick when we were girls, hiding our diaries from our older brother. If you pressed the shackle of a cheap lock at a 45-degree angle while slowly rotating the dials, you could feel a subtle hitch when each number caught, a microscopic give in the mechanism. I gently tensioned the shackle with my thumb, turned the first wheel until a faint click transmitted through the metal, then the second, the third. The lock sprang open. Inside, nestled on a bed of old concert ticket stubs from a Barney Raitt show we had attended in 1994, was a small black journal with a worn leather cover that smelled faintly of cocoa butter. I opened it to the last page. In Patricia's handwriting, unmistakably hers because she dotted her eyes with tiny half-circles that she had learned from our mother, were 6 words. "Do not trust him, the flower knows." I stood there blinking, my heart hammering against my ribs. Patricia was not whimsical. She had spent her career converting ambiguity into hard numbers. If she said the flower knows, the flower held something. I walked into the kitchen, pulled the stainless steel canister of all-purpose flour from the counter where it had sat for months, and plunged my hand into the soft, cold powder. My fingers touched a cold rectangle. I drew out a cheap prepaid flip phone sealed in a Ziploc bag, the kind you buy with cash at a gas station and load with minutes. I wiped it clean, pressed the power button, and watched the screen flicker to life with a single bar of battery. The call log held only one entry, an outgoing call to Tyler's number dated 2 weeks before the diagnosis even worsened. The voicemail icon blinked like a small digital heartbeat. I pressed play and held the phone to my ear. Patricia's voice filled the quiet kitchen, tinny but razor-sharp. "Tyler, it's Mom. I know what you and Vanessa are planning. Stop it now. I have already transferred the condo into a joint tenancy with right of survivorship with your Aunt Elaine. It is not in my trust, it is not part of your inheritance, it is done. If you touch 1 cent of what I have set aside for her, I will disinherit you from every other account, and I will personally instruct my estate attorney to tie you up in litigation until you're filing for bankruptcy. Do not test me. She sacrificed her whole savings for me, and you will not steal her home a second time." The message ended with a soft click. I replayed it twice, memorizing the inflection, the date stamp, the warning that carried the weight of a dead woman's final clarity. She had already seen them coming and she had prepared a battlefield. Before I continue this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you believe that family who prey on grief deserve everything coming to them. That voicemail rewired my grief into something else. The fog I had been moving through since Henry's diagnosis burned off in an instant, replaced by a cold, procedural clarity that felt like sliding into an old pair of work shoes. I carefully transferred the audio recording to a digital file on my laptop, and then to a thumb drive that I hid in a slit, I cut into the lining of my purse with a pair of cuticle scissors. I placed the burner phone back into the canister, buried it under fresh flour, and returned to the kitchen island as if nothing had changed. When Tyler and Vanessa came back that afternoon, I was exactly what they expected, a weepy, disoriented widow clutching a tissue and nodding at their condolences. They wasted no time pressing their advantage. Tyler presented a document he called a residential lease agreement with Family Care Rider, printed on heavy bond paper with a font that mimicked legal boilerplate. It required me to pay $1,200 a month directly to his personal account, with an addendum that acknowledged any prior financial contributions were gifts motivated by familial affection and did not constitute equity ownership or any interest in the property. He framed it as protection for me, so I wouldn't have to worry about property taxes or insurance, and Vanessa chimed in that they would even handle the utility transfers to my name, a sweet offer that would also attach my credit score as a co-signer on all future liability. I recognized the structure from 1,000 insurance denials. It was a trap designed to convert a property owner into a tenant with no rights, and then to evict her when she became inconvenient. I let my hands tremble as I held the pen, then set it down. I told them I was too overwhelmed, that my doctor had prescribed a low-dose benzodiazepine that made me foggy, that I needed a few days before I could even read a document clearly. I cited a medical phrase I had pulled from an old patient chart, acute stress disorder with transient cognitive impairment, and watched their faces flicker between impatience and forced sympathy. It was a strategic performance, and they bought it like a clearance rack bargain. The next morning, Vanessa proposed a new plan over a pitcher of orange juice and a platter of store-bought croissants that she arranged with the precision of a home staging expert. They wanted me to move into their guest room in Atlanta. "It would be so much better for your mental health to be surrounded by family," she said, her voice lacquered with concern, "and we'll take care of all the condo expenses until you're ready to come back." The translation was obvious. They wanted me out of the property so they could sell it or rent it to someone else, and a confused widow living in their house would be much easier to manipulate into signing quitclaim papers when the time came. I agreed to go, packing only a small suitcase with my medication, my laptop, and a copy of the notarized letter I had stitched inside the lining of a winter coat they would never search. Before leaving, I retrieved the burner phone and took it with me, and I spent an hour scanning every document in Patricia's file cabinet into a password-protected cloud folder. Their home in a suburban Atlanta cul-de-sac was a monument to aspirational debt. Vanessa had replaced the living room furniture twice in 18 months, and the tag still dangled from a velvet ottoman that had been an impulse buy from an Instagram ad for a boutique she followed. Tyler drove a leased Audi SUV with a monthly payment that made my eyes water. Within the first week, I noticed the red flags bloom like stains on a ceiling. Tyler paced the kitchen at odd hours, his voice low and urgent on the phone, words like balloon payment, 30-day demand letter, and "we're going to be underwater on the Savannah property leaking through the walls." One afternoon, he was on a call with someone who sounded like a debt collector, and I heard him say, "I can have the old lady sign a quitclaim by next Friday that will free up the asset." I pressed myself against the hallway wall, barely breathing. Vanessa's boutique shipments arrived in towering stacks, but I also found past due notices from a jewelry supplier wedged beneath a stack of unopened catalogs. One evening, a process server knocked on the door and handed Tyler a thick envelope with a law firm's return address. He shoved it into a kitchen drawer without opening it, his face pale as skim milk. I played the part of the grateful, doddering aunt. I shuffled around in slippers, offered to cook meals they never ate, and pretended not to understand when they spoke rapidly about liquidating assets and bridge loans. Every night I lay awake in the guest room, which smelled of plug-in air freshener and disappointment, building a mental spreadsheet of their financial fractures, the way I used to reconstruct a hospital's billing cycle when I suspected upcoding. But the big pivot came 10 days into my stay, on a humid Tuesday night when a pipe under their kitchen sink burst at 11 o'clock, spraying water across the travertine floor like a breached dam. Tyler stood paralyzed, scrolling through his phone as if a plumber would materialize through a rideshare app. Vanessa shrieked about her new custom baseboards and began wildly recording the chaos for a panicked story she never posted. I walked calmly to the garage, located the main water shutoff valve behind a stack of Peloton boxes, and twisted it clockwise with a strength I had built during years of maintaining Henry's woodworking shop. The water stopped instantly. I found an adjustable wrench in a toolbox that looked factory fresh, removed the sink trap, and identified a corroded gasket that had been wearing thin for months. Within an hour I had replaced it with a spare from a plumbing repair kit I had sparded in the cabinet under the guest bathroom sink while unpacking my toiletries, a detail I had filed away without consciously knowing why. I mopped the floor with the efficiency of a woman who had cleaned countless surgical recovery rooms while waiting for biopsy results. As I worked, Tyler watched from the kitchen doorway with a mixture of confusion and something that looked almost like resentment. I told him my father was a union plumber out of Local 421. He made sure his daughters could sweat copper pipes and read a pressure gauge before we were old enough to drive a car. The truth was, our father had taught me and Patricia to diagnose a faulty check valve and replace a wax ring on a toilet when other girls were learning to braid hair. That skill marked me as a threat in that house, a woman who could not be reduced to a trembling signature on a piece of paper. That night I heard them arguing in their bedroom, Tyler's voice tense. "She's not as foggy as she pretends. We have to move faster." A few days later, while Vanessa was at a Bardock's appointment at a med spa called Renew You, Tyler left the house in a rush, his car squealing out of the driveway. He had forgotten to lock the small office just off the kitchen. I had been waiting for this window with the patience of a claims auditor who knows a fraudulent file will eventually be left unattended. I slipped inside, my hospital billing radar fully activated. The room smelled of toner and dust. The desk was a chaos of printed emails, bank statements, and a shredder bin that had overflowed, spilling narrow strips like confetti. I knelt and began piecing together the strips on the carpet, working from the edges inward the way I had once reconstructed shredded oxycodone prescription forms in a fraud investigation. A pattern emerged. A home equity line of credit statement showing a balance of $212,000 on a property they did not fully own, a cash-out refinance on a rental condo in Savannah that was already in pre-foreclosure, and an angry letter from a hard money lender demanding $32,000 immediately. And then, buried in a manila folder labeled Mom's Estate, with a sticky note that read Final Version for Probate, I found the original of the trust document Tyler had shown me. I examined it under the desk lamp. The notary stamp was incomplete, no commission number visible, and the signature of the notary was a name I recognized. Stacy Munro, Vanessa's best friend from her sorority. I pulled out my phone and ran a free public records search through the Georgia Superior Court Clerks Cooperative Authority website right there, my fingers trembling. Stacy Munro had no current notary commission. Her last commission had expired 4 years ago, and she had never been authorized to notarize documents in Florida. The trust was a forgery, probably assembled in a PDF editor, and signed with a practiced hand that had traced Patricia's signature from a greeting card. Attached to the folder was a draft of a quitclaim deed already filled out with my name, ready for my signature, which would transfer any residual rights I might claim into Tyler's sole ownership. The cover email, printed out and circled in red ink, was from Tyler to Vanessa with a timestamp from 2 weeks after Patricia's death. It read, "Once the old lady signs this, we can list the condo by Monday and clear enough to pay off the HELOC before the balloon hits. Make sure you have the recorder running in case she gets confused later and claims we coerced her." I photographed every document with my phone, careful to capture the metadata and the edges of each page, then I returned everything to its original position. I locked the office door behind me using a Barbie pin technique Patricia, and I had perfected as teenagers sneaking into our parents' liquor cabinet to swap the cheap gin with water. You slide the curved end into the keyhole, press upward against the pin tumbler, and rotate gently until the cylinder gives. No damage, no trace. That night I dug into my luggage and retrieved a small leather pouch my sister had given me years ago, a just-in-case kit containing a spare key to her safe deposit box at First National Bank and a handwritten note with a box number. The journal entry had also mentioned a bank, and the pieces clicked into place like a lock cylinder aligning. The next morning I told Vanessa I needed fresh air to clear my head and drove Patricia's old Honda Accord, a car they had allowed me to keep because it had 160,000 miles and no resale value. The interior smelled of her spearmint gum and the faintest hint of the gardenia perfume she wore on good days. I parked at the downtown branch and walked inside with the key clutched in my palm. I met with a woman named Mrs. Calloway, a compliance officer with silver hair swept into a neat French twist, and the calm, unblinking demeanor of someone who has spent decades dealing with families after a death and has seen every variant of greed. I explained my sister's passing and presented the key. She checked my identification against the joint account Patricia had listed, nodded once, and led me into a small room paneled in walnut, where she retrieved box number 347 from the vault. Inside, on a bed of acid-free tissue, I found a certified copy of a recorded warranty deed, dated 8 months before Patricia's final hospitalization, conveying the condo into joint tenancy with right of survivorship between Patricia Ann Mercer and Elaine Renee Jacobs. The deed had been filed with the Pinellas County Clerk of Court, all stamps and seals in perfect order, a complete, unbreakable chain of title. I ran my fingers over the raised, embossed seal and felt something loosen in my chest. Beneath the deed lay a handwritten letter from my sister, sealed with a wax stamp in the shape of a compass rose like something from an old maritime novel. I opened it with shaking hands. "Elaine, if you're reading this, I am gone and Tyler has already shown you his trust. I knew he would try because he tried to pressure me while I was on the early chemo when he thought the pain medication would make me vulnerable. He and Vanessa are drowning in debt, nearly $400,000 in consumer loans and failed business investments. They will forge whatever document they need. The deed I filed trumps any trust, any backdated letter. You are already the owner. Do not sign anything. Take this to a probate attorney named Deborah Keene in Gulfport. She has all my original files and a recording of the notary session. She will help you file for a quiet title action and an ejectment if they try to occupy. I also embedded a forensic marker in the trust they will present. The notary line contains a misspelling of the notary's county as Gwinnett instead of Gwinnett. Any bank investigator will spot it. Use your talent for finding the one wrong code, Elaine. I knew you would. P.S. The flower nose means I hid the phone in the canister because Tyler never cooks and Vanessa thinks carbs are the enemy. Mrs. Calloway watched me read, her hands folded on the table like a schoolteacher. When I finished and wiped my eyes, she spoke quietly. "Mrs. Jacobs, we've been monitoring accounts linked to your nephew for a different matter for some time. His business line of credit flagged for suspicious activity involving structured cash deposits 2 months ago. I am not just a compliance officer. I am a liaison with an interagency task force investigating a ring of real estate title fraud cases across the Southeast. Your nephew's activities have intersected our investigation at a perfect angle. If you can obtain the physical original of the forged trust document from his possession, we can compare it to your sister's signature samples on file and perform ink and toner dating analysis. That evidence will be enough for a federal indictment." She slid a sealed chain of custody envelope across the table. "The document must be handled minimally, placed directly into this envelope without folding, and delivered to me within 48 hours. Do not touch it with bare hands, wear the nitrile gloves inside." I took the envelope. My task was clear. That evening back at the house, I prepared for the final extraction, but I also decided to test something, a line I had drawn in my own moral sand. In my career, I had seen families torn apart by greed and addiction, but a persistent, naive part of me had hoped that beneath the fraud and the desperation Tyler still carried some flicker of love for the woman who had raised him, who had bailed him out of 2 car loans and a maxed-out credit card before he turned 30. I needed to extinguish that hope completely, so I would not hesitate when the moment came to watch him fall. During dinner, I waited until Vanessa was mid-sentence about her upcoming collaboration with a micro-influencer who made scented candles that looked like desserts. Then I let my face go slack. I dropped my fork, and it clattered against my plate like a small metallic alarm. I slumped sideways in my chair, my body falling heavily onto the kitchen tile with a sound that was part thud and part bone meeting stone. I made sure my head struck the floor with an audible impact, though I angled it just enough to avoid real injury. I kept my eyes half-lidded, my breathing shallow, my limbs limp. Vanessa screamed, but it was a scream of startled inconvenience, not fear. Tyler stood up, took 2 steps toward me and stopped. I could see his sneakers inches from my face through the narrow slit of my vision, a pair of designer trainers he had paid $600 for while creditors called daily. He bent down, not to check my pulse or call 911, but to grab my purse from the counter where I had left it. He rifled through it, muttering, "Where is that thumb drive she's always carrying? She's been recording everything, I know it." He didn't even glance at my face. He stepped over my body, the sole of his shoe pressing down on the fabric of my cardigan, his weight shifting onto my side as if I were a piece of discarded laundry, and continued searching. In that moment, any lingering affection I had felt for my sister's boy evaporated like acetone on a hot sidewalk. I waited another 30 seconds, then stirred groggily, claiming a dizzy spell. Vanessa handed me a glass of water with a performance of concern so hollow you could have heard the echo of their empty bank account through it. The next morning I called Mrs. Calloway from the guest bathroom with the fan running, and told her I would have the document by noon. I walked into Tyler's office while he was on the back patio arguing with a hard money lender about a missed payment, his voice rising and cracking. I pulled on the nitrile gloves, located the original trust folder in the desk drawer, and slipped the entire folder into the chain of custody envelope without unfolding anything. I sealed it, signed the label, and drove to the bank branch. Mrs. Calloway met me in the same walnut-paneled room and immediately began processing the evidence. Within an hour, her forensic team's preliminary analysis confirmed what I already knew. The toner used on the trust document was manufactured 6 months after Patricia's date of death, and the indentation analysis from an electrostatic detection device showed the signature had been traced from a greeting card with slow, deliberate strokes. The trap was fully armed, and all that remained was the spring. 2 days later, the bank froze Tyler's access to certain linked accounts pending investigation. He and Vanessa unraveled in real time. I heard them screaming behind closed doors about a breach of trust and phrases like, "That woman knows something," and "We're going to lose everything." On Friday morning, Tyler informed me with a tight, brittle smile that we were all going to the bank to resolve a minor issue with Mom's safe deposit box that required my physical presence as a co-signer. I knew the script. He was going to try to force me to sign an affidavit or a new deed in the confusion of a bank meeting, probably claiming it was just a formality to release funds. I dressed in the navy blazer I hadn't worn since Henry's funeral, the one with a secret interior pocket that held my digital voice recorder already running, and climbed into their Audi SUV. The drive was silent, except for the tapping of Vanessa's nails on her phone screen and the low hum of an acoustic playlist that Tyler played to seem calm. At the bank, a personal banker escorted us to a conference room with frosted glass walls and a long walnut table. Mrs. Calloway was already seated there, along with a uniformed deputy from the county sheriff's department and a plainclothes FBI agent named Agent Morrison, whose posture was as still as a photograph. Tyler launched into a rehearsed speech about how his aunt was confused and elderly, how he had the trust documents proving his inheritance, how the deed needed to be corrected to reflect his mother's true wishes. He slid the forged trust across the table toward me alongside a new quitclaim deed that had been drafted by a paralegal he'd found online. A gold-plated pen appeared from his breast pocket. Vanessa smiled with the warmth of a mannequin and said, "Just sign, Aunt Elaine, and we can finally all go home and heal." I picked up the pen, examined it under the conference room light like a suspect specimen, then set it down with a soft click. "No," Tyler's face reddened from the collar upward. "What do you mean no? You have no legal standing. That trust supersedes everything. I'll have you evicted for squatting by Monday. This is my property." I leaned forward and said, in a voice steadier than the still water of the marina outside Patricia's balcony, "Your trust was printed on toner manufactured 6 months after my sister died, with a notary stamp from a woman named Stacy Munro, whose notary commission expired 4 years ago, and who misspelled Gwinnett as Gwinnett in the county line. The actual recorded warranty deed, filed 8 months before Patricia's death with the Pinellas County Clerk, names me as joint tenant with right of survivorship. She explicitly disinherited you from the condo in a recorded document. And the voicemail she left you on a burner phone she hid in her kitchen flower canister, which I have recorded, time-stamped, and authenticated, warns you exactly what would happen if you tried to touch my inheritance." I slid the envelope Mrs. Calloway had prepared across the table, containing the forensic analysis and a copy of the deed. "What's going to happen now is that you are both going to be arrested for forgery, title fraud, and felony elder exploitation. Lying to a widow to steal her home is a crime in 2 states, and the evidence is already in federal hands." Tyler grabbed the envelope, scanned the contents, and went the color of old milk. Vanessa started to babble about how she didn't know anything. She was just following his instructions, but Agent Morrison was already reading them their rights in a low, practiced monotone. The sheriff's deputy placed handcuffs on Tyler's wrists, and he flinched at the cold metal. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I simply felt the immense, quiet satisfaction of a coded claim finally being paid in full, the release of years of tension in my shoulders that I hadn't realized I'd been carrying since the first time I heard my sister's diagnosis over the phone. The legal aftermath unfolded over 14 months with the precision of a well-drafted settlement. With the recorded deed now undisputed, I filed a motion for quiet title through Deborah Keene, the probate attorney Patricia had recommended, and the fraudulent trust was declared void ab initio, meaning it was void from the very beginning, as though it had never existed. I then filed a civil suit against Tyler and Vanessa for unjust enrichment, civil theft under Florida Statute 772. 11. And intentional infliction of emotional distress. My evidence package was anchored by the notarized letter, the voicemail audio, the forensic toner analysis, and a spreadsheet I had created detailing every one of the $88,000 in payments, cross-referenced with dates and medical procedure codes. The court, after a 2-day bench trial, awarded me a judgment of $195,000. That number was not random. It represented treble damages of $264,000 for the civil theft of my savings under Florida's law, reduced by settlement credits, and an offset for the court costs Tyler would never pay, plus an additional $43,000 in emotional distress and punitive sanctions for the forgery. The judge, a stern woman with owlish glasses, stated from the bench that the case was one of the most egregious examples of familial fraud this court has encountered. Tyler's assets, such as they were seized. The condo remained mine, but Tyler had clouded the title by filing a fraudulent lis pendens on the property during the proceedings. To remove it, I filed a foreclosure action on his claimed interest, and the court ordered a judicial sale of that interest at auction. I credit bid my judgment at the auction, meaning I used the debt he owed me as the purchase price, and I was the sole bidder. The property vested in me free and clear of any cloud, and the foreclosure sale deed was recorded the same day. That is the technical definition of foreclosing on the condo, and I did it with the quiet assistance of a title company that specialized in cleaning up real estate fraud. When Tyler could not satisfy any of the monetary judgment, the court ordered wage garnishment. He now works as an orderly at a county hospital in DeKalb County, a job he took after his fraud conviction made him unhireable for any financial sector position, even as a leasing agent. 30% of every paycheck, after legally allowable exemptions, is deducted and routed to me through the court disbursement unit. On my tax return, I consulted a forensic accountant named Miriam Okonkwo, a woman I had met during my billing days at a coding seminar, who advised me that garnished wages are considered a compensatory recovery for non-physical personal injury, and are taxable as ordinary income, but can be offset by legal fees and recovery costs, leaving the net taxed at a minimal bracket. I label the line item in my mental ledger as emotional damages because it amuses me to frame it that way, and I deduct the cost of my weekly therapist car pays against the income without a shred of guilt. Today I own that condo outright, with a fresh coat of pale blue paint on the walls and a keyless entry system for rotating tenants. I rent exclusively to traveling nurses because I remember the exhaustion of a 12-hour shift in oncology, the way your feet ache and your heart settles into a low hum of managed compassion, and the quiet dignity of someone who just needs a clean, safe place with a marina view to sleep before doing it all again. I renovated the guest bathroom with a walk-in shower and new tile, and I kept the small ceramic angel Patricia had placed on the windowsill years ago, its painted wings slightly chipped. The nurses leave entries in a guest journal I place on the coffee table. One wrote, "Thank you for the angel. I looked at it after a hard shift and felt like someone was watching over me." Another wrote, "This place saved my sanity." Sometimes I read their words and feel my sister's presence like a steady hand on my shoulder, the hand that once held mine during the infusions. Patricia had understood something that I only fully absorbed after the court case ended, and the quiet days returned. The best revenge is not getting what they wanted, it is building something so stable and so ethically grounded that their greed recedes into irrelevance, a small ugly footnote in a story that otherwise glows with ordinary decency. I learned that money spent on trying to save a life is never wasted, even when the life cannot be saved, and that the same forensic patience that used to catch fraudulent CPT codes on an insurance claim can also restore a woman's future and provide a soft landing for others. Family can be a beautiful anchor or a well-disguised trap with velvet ottomans and borrowed smiles. The only thing that saved me was Patricia's brilliant, quiet countermeasure, a warranty deed filed in the bright open daylight of a county clerk's office while the rest of us were staring at bloodwork reports and pretending we had more time. She did what the best appraisers always do. She saw the true value of things and the hidden liabilities before anyone else even noticed the cracks. Have you ever discovered a dark secret about someone you trusted completely? How did you handle it? I want to hear your stories in the comments. And if this video resonated with you, please hit like and subscribe to this channel for more stories about the quiet, fierce power of people who refuse to be erased. I'll see you in the next one.